National title rematch in Seattle this week. Michigan, Washington, and Washington is favored?
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Hope you all enjoyed Locked On College Football behind the scenes yesterday. If you understand, then, well, you understand, but no such happenings today. Because today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Our friends at FanDuel have made a line that I can't wrap my head around. Roman Tomashoff of Locked On Huskies is going to help me try to explain that. Then we're going to pick every other game in the Big Ten. And is Billy Napier saving his job if he wins this week against Central Florida? Well, that's all coming up on today's show. But Roman, can you just help me understand why Washington, unranked, 3-2, can't get out of their own way, 2.5 point favorites against Michigan, number 10 in the country? What? Why? Just why?
So you asked me to explain. I think my answer would be sure. Like, yeah, I guess.
Ringing endorsement.
Yeah. Because it's exactly what you said there, Spencer. Are they going to be able to get out of their own way? Where you look at the metrics in so many different categories, and Jedd Fisch has done a really good job. You look at the defense. This is a top 10 scoring defense. This is a top 10 total defense. This is the number 6 passing defense in the nation. Not that matters against Michigan. You look at the offense. This is the number 21 offense in the nation, like in terms of total yardage. Washington is top 20 in the nation in yards per play on offense and defense. Yet they are the only team that is unranked and has losses on their schedule. You look at it, it's kind of insane that's where we are with this team. It's because they can't get out of their own way. So that's something where you look at it, you say, all right, like something we talked about over on Locked On Huskies, Jedd Fisch hasn't beaten a top 10 team yet in his career as a head coach. He's got an opportunity to do that, and if he can get out of his own way, that's it. If he gets out of his own way, they win that game at Rutgers rather easily. They left, 17 points on the board? And that's being kind.
They don't even need to get out of their own way. They just need to get off the field before the play is over.
And don't run right in front of the referee when you're doing that, too.
Yeah. You could have snuck on. If you'd been like right in the middle point of where the two officials are, you could have gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling kids. But alas, it was right in front of the ref, and he pulled out his flag like, what, did you think I didn't see that? Here you go.
Like the worst part, like not being at that game, obviously we get a different view. I was like, are you serious? An illegal substitution. We're watching that replay, and it's like, where I'm counting 11. And then you see that wide shot, like after my jaw dropped. I was like, no way. Like, no way.
And then the next play was a touchdown because you knew, as a Washington fan, you had to know, like, they're scoring. If not on this play, then within 3 plays on this drive. Momentum swings just kind of do that. So I hear where you're coming from and probably what Vegas is seeing by favoring the Huskies in this spot. And if you're superstitious, I'm not superstitious. I'm incredibly superstitious. And I'm going to go against that notion later. But if you look at this matchup, which is now a conference game, it wasn't in the matchup I'm going to refer to, but the last time a team from Michigan that had double-digit wins and a New Year's Bowl appearance or better in the previous season came in to Washington, who has a new coach with a transfer quarterback ranked inside the top 12, that Michigan program ended up losing the football game. So if you believe in the stars realigning, then there you go. Because 2022, Michigan State came in, Washington 3.5 point favorite. And I remember the time going, well, that doesn't make any sense. How could that possibly? And Vegas knew, and Washington was better start to finish. I trust that Washington has a better offensive capability from a ceiling standpoint. I just don't know if that exists in the same world where you're playing this Michigan defense, which I think is vastly improved from the first couple weeks.
So I certainly agree with that. Like the numbers, I've spent a lot of time hearkening on the passing numbers, where Michigan is 16th in the Big Ten in passing defense, allowing close to 250 yards a game. I certainly agree they're improved, they're healthy, which is going to be a big thing back there. But my biggest question in all this, when it comes to can Washington win this game, is when you started referencing that, I thought you were going to talk about the national championship, and I was just like, the dog PTSD flashbacks meme. That was me.
No, I wouldn't do that to you, but I thought about it.
You have before. Let's.
Like I said, I thought about it.
But when I think about it, I think about that game, and the biggest thing for me is, what are Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant going to do in this ballgame? That's what this all comes down to, in my opinion, because you can, Will Johnson is a phenomenal cornerback, but you can find a way to, I likened it to when Richard Sherman just, when people wouldn't throw at his half of the field, I likened it to that, where you can find ways to somewhat work around it. Not that it helps, but you can find ways. When Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant are just destroying your interior, that's not necessarily going to work out very well. So that's what this is all going to come down to, in my opinion. And if it goes the way that it did in January, don't love this. But if you can find ways to, one thing that I would be really intrigued to watch in this game is, how much DeMond Williams Jr. do we see? Do we see the true freshman who's really explosive and electrifying?
The quarterback, for those who don't know.
Yeah, the quarterback. I'm sorry, the backup quarterback, who is really fun to watch outside the pocket. Do we see a little bit more of him? We saw him really early against Rutgers. He played his most snaps of the game that week, or his most non-garbage time snaps. And I'm really curious to see how they negate that. That's one thing that I think could really help in this game.
So coming into this year, FanDuel had set this line at Michigan minus 11.5. And I said, that's too big. Then it went down to 9.5, 8.5. I said, that's probably about right. This is a dramatic shift, and I think an overreaction from the betting markets to move it that much. And look, we saw this with Michigan last week. They were a big favorite against USC before the year, underdog by the time the game kicks off. Is it foolhardy of me to think that exact script is going to play out? Maybe it is, but my confidence in Michigan here goes back to what you and I talked about with this game before the season, Roman. The trenches are advantage Michigan on both sides of the football here. The Washington defensive line, I think, is better, tell me if I'm wrong, than the Washington offensive line. And last year's Washington O-line, literally picked as the best in all of college football, couldn't stop the Michigan front, which is just mauling everybody every week. I like where the Michigan run game is at. I hate where their passing game is at. But they've got a formula here, and I just don't see Washington as having the tools to be able to stop the Michigan recipe.
What it's going to come down to for me, at least on the other side of the ball, is what's the defensive line going to look like, where Washington lost one of their best defensive tackles for the year in Javon Parker, who tore his Achilles in the Rutgers game, which is a real bummer because he had arguably the best game of his career that week and was playing so well. That's what really worries me. And the thing is, they had a really solid game plan against Kyle Monangai. And outside of a couple long runs, I know you can't take those away, but outside of a couple long runs, they did a good job of attacking that. Like the Samuel Brown touchdown run came on the play after Javon Parker got hurt, which, hurts and is its own thing. But the game plan is solid. My question is, what is that going to look like? Because we've seen Jed scheme around offensive line issues before. But on the defensive line, I don't think we've seen Washington face a test like this, where Kyle Monangai and Rutgers last week is the closest, but this is a very big step up. And if you can find a way to contain this Michigan rushing attack, which is going to be really, really difficult, maybe you have a shot. Because Alex Orji against the secondary, I like Washington in that matchup. I know that's a bold take, but I don't know how much we're going to see that, Spencer.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, Michigan's formula is very simple right now. Run the football until your opponent shows they can stop it. If they cannot hold you to 1 yard per carry, and just keep running the football and be old school Georgia Tech, triple option style, where it's like, oh my gosh, they're passing. That's a wild concept. I didn't know that was allowed. So can I get a game prediction out of you, or are you still not in the prediction world? I mean, I'm going to. I'm going
to let you go for it. You talked about being superstitious. Okay. I am arguably more superstitious than you.
Okay, that's fair. We're both baseball fans, so that's understandable. And we're both fans of non-playoff teams. I love that sport. I'm going Michigan here, but give me a slugfest. I mean a real, not quite like Iowa, Nebraska last year kind of slugfest. I don't even remember if those teams matched up, frankly, but it's not going to be like 7-6. I'll go 2016. I think Michigan goes in and gets the win.
I respect that.
Okay, and Roman's just going to leave it there. I am going to hold his feet to the fire on picking every other game in the Big Ten, though.
Hold on. Let me just put this on the record, though, because you held my feet to the fire last week and made me pick the Rutgers game. And look what happened there. So, I'm trying to balance it out this week.
Yeah, okay. Maybe you should have better picks. That's all I'm saying. He's going to have the chance to do that coming up next. We're going through the whole Big Ten slate. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. So, FanDuel's got everything you want for college football. Did you know that? I'll talk about the NFL in just a moment. But do you think that I'm right that Michigan goes into Seattle, gets a win? Michigan is an underdog. I can't explain it. Does FanDuel know something? Something that I don't? I don't know. Here's what I do know. They're America's #1 sportsbook, and NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. College football is in full force, and it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. And it's all available over there at FanDuel if you want to throw down a little cheddar. So check them out. FanDuel.com, that's the place to go. FanDuel.com for America's #1 sportsbook. Does Nebraska get a second straight bounce back win? Well, they're hosting Rutgers. That's not an easy team to beat. Roman knows that. Locked On Huskies still joining me here on Locked On College Football. Nebraska is at home. They're favored by 7. Last time they had that situation, Roman, they lost to Illinois. I think that was a real wake-up call, learning experience for the Cornhuskers that are progressing in year 2 under Matt Rule. I'm picking this in favor of Nebraska 24-17. As much as anything, I just want Nebraska fans to not have to watch their team give them another one possession loss. Because, man, those poor fans, they've just been through it. So I like Rutgers. They played well enough to win last week, but they did not play a completely dominant football game. I think Nebraska at home gets it done.
I think I'm with you in this case. The one thing I'm looking at in this, and speaking of one possession losses, you're preaching to the choir there. One thing that I'm really be watching this game is Dylan Raiola versus this Rutgers secondary, where I think that if you're able to protect him and run the ball effectively at times too, there are going to be some holes in the back end of this Rutgers defense where it's solid, but I wasn't necessarily overly impressed. Will Rogers threw for over 300 yards, Denzel Boston 51-yard catch and run touchdown.
And that game was in Piscataway too.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and it was still, obviously super close, and Washington, as I said earlier, left a whole bunch of points on the field. I think that Nebraska finds a way to get it done.
Yeah, I like the Cornhuskers in that spot. They're sitting 4-1 on the year, 1-1 in Big Ten play. Rutgers still hasn't lost a football game in the calendar year 2024. Go figure, just like we all expected. A team Washington will face later in the season, USC. They'll come to Seattle, but for this week, they are going to Minneapolis to play Minnesota. Golden Gophers 0-2 in the Big Ten so far. Offense hasn't been that impressive. Defense kind of comes and goes. I don't know what Minnesota is going to be by the end of the season with PJ Fleck. I don't think they are good enough to beat USC, who last week played a poor first half against Wisconsin, and as bad as they were in the first, they were just as good in the second. Sure, on the road, you got to ask yourself which USC team shows up, but I like the Trojans here. They're a sizable favorite. I think they win big. I think this is USC 35-17.
I think I'm with you. I think USC covers in this game. I just haven't really been all that impressed with the whole PJ Fleck experience as a whole, and just everything this season. I feel like, Spencer, you and I talked very briefly about the Minnesota-Michigan game last week, where Michigan just let the game slip away, and Minnesota, the onside kick, we won't have to get into that, but they had every opportunity. They weren't able to capitalize, and I really am not that impressed. Yeah, I'm with you. USC wins big.
Yeah, and I love the way that Miller Moss and this offense are playing, the way the receiving core came alive. Jacoby Lane and Kyron Hudson the second half against Wisconsin. What do you know? Lincoln Riley's offense is good. Ho-ho!
What No way.
Holy smokes. I can't believe it. Here's what I actually can't believe. Indiana's 5-0, ranked 23rd in the country, 2-0 in Big Ten play. I read an article the other day, and on 3, they're traveling to Northwestern this week, who's 2-2, 0-1 in Big Ten play so far under David Braun. I read an article this week talking about how Indiana could make the college football playoff. All they'd have to do is keep beating the teams in the Big Ten that aren't very good, and then beat Michigan, go lose to Ohio State, and you're 11-1. I mean, listen to this Indiana schedule. It's one of this is one of the most shocking things to date. Now, they haven't played a tough schedule so far, but it's not like it gets hard. At Northwestern, then a bye, then they host Nebraska, they host Washington. Those will be the games where we'll know if they're going to have a 10-win season and beat Arizona from a year ago. At Sparty, host Michigan. At Ohio State, host Purdue. I mean, Kurt Cignetti's got the boys kind of rolling right now in Bloomington. Man. And I'm not picking against them till I see evidence to the contrary that an inferior team like Northwestern, who I think is okay, but not that good, slightly below average, is how I'd characterize the Wildcats from what I've seen so far this year. I'm taking Indiana here. Curtis Rourke is balling 31-20. Give me the Hoosiers.
Yeah, I have not been impressed with this Northwestern offense at all. I got to watch them up close and personal when they were out here in Seattle a couple of weeks ago. It's just not that great. And, if Kurt Cignetti can just find a way to scheme up against quarters coverage, because that's basically all Northwestern runs, you're going to find a way to make plays. And that offense, they found ways to make plays, big plays all season long. I like them a lot. Yeah, this Northwestern team, they're watching their offense is not fun, and asking their defense to do so much is just somewhat unfair of them. Yeah, there's no way Northwestern wins this game.
Ohio State hosting Iowa, Oregon hosting Michigan State. We'll get to that in just a sec. But Ohio State hosting Iowa, I had this prediction before the year. I'm sticking with it. Buckeyes are favored by around 20 points. I think they're going to cover that number. Final score, 27-0. I was not putting a point on the board this week.
I was going to say the exact same thing. I like
Are you not entertained?
That's exactly where I was going to go with this. This Iowa offense, that's one of the reasons I'm still sticking to a preseason prediction that I made, by the way, over on Locked On Huskies, that Washington can go into Kinnick and beat them there next week. We'll get to that.
We'll address that. We'll address that when the time comes.
Yeah, we'll get to that next week. But it's because of this Iowa offense, Spencer. It's just, same thing, different year. Like that's all it is. This Buckeye
team, it's better. I think it's better. I'm just like, I don't think it's ready for Ohio State on the road. Sure, like statistically, the numbers are objectively better.
Right, but it's hard to get worse, sort of thing.
So. Yeah. I'll believe you can hang with Ohio State when I see it.
Purdue 27-0. Give me 35-0. I just.
Okay. I respect that. I still like Iowa's defense, but I could see it being 35-0. Last time I predict Iowa to not score a point, Big Ten championship game against Michigan, they didn't score a point. Purdue at Wisconsin. Who gets the first Big Ten win this week? I'll take Wisconsin. I don't know if they cover the 14 points though.
It's 14. Yeah, I'm kind of with you there, but Wisconsin's going to win this game. This Purdue team is not fun to watch.
No, new offensive coordinator because it wasn't going very well for Ryan Walters and company. They're looking for answers on that side of the ball. I think they seek more answers, but Wisconsin's they showed something in the first half last week against USC. Can they bring that same sort of energy? If they do, they cover the 14. If they don't, I think Purdue, new OC, it can provide a spark when you make a coaching change in there at times. And lastly, a couple of games that have big point spreads. I think Penn State, favored by about 4 touchdowns at home against UCLA, more likely to cover than Oregon at home against Michigan State. I do think both these teams are winning by a lot of points.
Yeah, I was expecting a little more parity in these picks, but these games just for the most part feel very one-sided. Yeah, I think both these teams cover. This UCLA team especially is just it's the same thing as Purdue. It's just not fun to watch.
UCLA is bad.
They're very, very bad.
Yes.
I know that this is the cutting edge analysis that all your everydayers tune into here on Locked On College Football. UCLA, bad.
Bad football team. Not good. I don't think they're getting to 10 points. I think I got Penn State 42-6. I've got Oregon 38-10. Like I said, though, I would be more surprised if UCLA pushes Penn State than it would be if Michigan State were to push Oregon, even in Eugene. That's a full slate of picks for Week 6 in the Big Ten. And that's Roman Tomashoff of Locked On Huskies. Roman, I enjoyed it as always, my man.
Spencer, as always, thanks for having me.
Is Billy Napier saving his job? I don't even know at this point. I'm going to try to make sense of that and their game against UCF coming up next. Billy Napier might be saving his job. Now, this is a guy who I thought Florida should have moved on from after Texas A&M, who's a fine but not great team, went into the swamp and blew out the Gators. Final score 33-20. Game was not that close for the second time in 3 weeks on their home field. Miami did it week 1. Texas A&M did it, but they beat Mississippi State. They're coming off a bye, and they're at home against UCF. If the Golden Knights go into Gainesville, who have been in a power conference for about 2 hours, this is their second season, I don't know how, if you're Scott Strickland, the athletic director at Florida, you can look at that and deem it to be an acceptable result, or how you can feel like there is any upward trajectory, because I already don't see it. You know, a 45-28 win at Mississippi State, okay, that's much closer to where this Florida team should be playing compared to what their talent is and what the schedule looks like. But to not only lose both the Miami and Texas A&M games, but to get embarrassed both times, every single week, and I'm sure it is, should be a significant data point that you gather to work towards, are we bringing back Billy Napier as our head coach come 2025? And look, I wouldn't. Coming into this year, I was more inclined to say, yeah, he can get to 5-7 and save his job, and it's just a tough schedule, and you kind of give him a pass there. Well, they have 2 wins. How many do you think they can get? They're 3-point underdogs. Oh, man. Can you imagine going into the middle of the swamp in 2008, grabbing a microphone and saying, one day, you're going to be an underdog to UCF in this stadium? That'd be insane. You would have been laughed. You would have been booed. They would have thrown water bottles in all likelihood. I mean, and yet here we are in 2024, and that's the reality for Billy Napier and company. So, underdogs against Central Florida. I'll get back to that game in just a moment. Next week, they go at Tennessee. Don't think you're winning that football game. Just a hunch. Then you come back home and you host Kentucky on your homecoming day. Well, if you win that game and you beat Central Florida, suddenly you're 1 win away from getting to 5 wins, which is a number before the year. I said, hey, you get there and Billy Napier keeps his job. But I would have thought they'd beaten either Miami or Texas A&M. I predicted them foolhardily to win both of those games because of some blind faith that Billy Napier hasn't deserved but somehow got from me for those predictions. But the difficult stretch of Florida's schedule hasn't begun yet. UCF, Tennessee, Kentucky. No, that's not the hard stuff. The hard stuff is November 2nd. Georgia, neutral site, at Texas, host LSU, host Ole Miss, at Florida State. Now, those last 3 games certainly look a lot more winnable than they might have to some coming into the year. LSU's exactly what I expected them to be. I didn't think they would beat USC. They didn't. They've won every game since. That's also what I predicted. I have not made an incorrect prediction for LSU's game so far this year. And, I mean, the South Carolina game, like that could have, some would say should have been a loss. But alas, it was not, because Garrett Nussmeier is very good. Ole Miss, those games are at home. If you find a way to win one of those, suddenly you could be looking at bowl eligibility, because you have 2 winnable games in your next 3, and your last game of the season is at Florida State, which is on the road, but I don't know who's going to show up to that game in Tallahassee, because who wants to watch the abomination to college football that is the Florida State offense? It is bad. Tough watch. Not a good team. So suddenly that game appears incredibly winnable. And I do still think, but for the sake of Florida fans' sanity and the hopes they have emotionally invested into the Florida football program, that this isn't the case. If Billy Napier finds a way to get to 5 wins, what do you know? He probably keeps his job, because the schedule is so brutal. And then you have a prove it or lose it year come 2025. But it all starts with this game against UCF. So the Golden Knights are favored for a reason. That reason is that KJ Jefferson is good. RJ Harvey is good. Gus Malzahn as a head coach is good. That's the first reason. The second reason, I don't know how much Vegas factors this in, but I certainly factor this in. The Gators have something kind of to play for. Don't know how high the vibes are. The Knights, on the other hand, have everything to play for in this game. It's a non-conference matchup, but it's the first time UCF is playing Florida as a member of the Big 12. They have the opportunity here to make a statement in the state of Florida, where UCF can be one of the best, if not the best, high school recruiting teams in the Big 12. They could go into the stadium of an SEC team and walk away with a win. They could go into mighty Florida and win the football game. That'd be a heck of a statement for Gus Malzahn and company. And they need it for the sake of their locker room, not for the sake of the Big 12 conference standings. This game has no bearing on that. This has a lot of implications for how confident UCF can be going forward the rest of the year. They're not out of the Big 12 title chase. You know why? No one's out of it. Literally nobody. The Big 12 coming into this year was viewed by many, myself included, as the deepest, most competitive conference title race of the Power 4 leagues. That has borne itself out to be true. And somehow we all underplayed how crazy, how chaotic, how wild, how wide open that conference truly is. So UCF, with Big Noon in town, gets embarrassed last week against Colorado. A 27-point home loss when you were favored by around 2 touchdowns? Yikes. That's a major yikes. So they're playing, at least, I would hope, with a chip on their shoulder of being ticked off. That's a dangerous thing. Do you think Florida's ticked off? They're rested. They're coming off a bye. They're at home. But fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I shall not fall into the trap once again of picking Florida to win a football game that they're incredibly capable of winning. The Gators are not huge underdogs for a reason. They've got plenty of talent. If they can just try to find a way to play some cohesive, consistent football. Don't play one half like you did against Texas A&M. Don't forget to roll out of bed like you did week 1 against Miami. If you can play with the talent that's there, sure, things could go well. I don't have any confidence in Florida just because they beat Mississippi State. Mississippi State, yeah, it's an SEC team, but guess what? They got housed. They got housed by Toledo. Okay, Jeff Lebby could be a fine head coach. He does not have a fine football team. He's like Willie Fritz at Houston in the Big 12. Good coach. Can do well. Not going to do well this season. All the chips are stacked against you. So give me UCF, give me KJ Jefferson, the Knights, to get a bounce back win and remind the rest of the Big 12, hey, we might have 2 losses here, but we can still beat you no matter who you are. I will take the Golden Knights to go into Gainesville, win the game, 28-24. Should be a fun football game. Thanks for making this your first listen. Go make Locked On Sports today your second, with Peter Bukowski giving you the biggest takes from the biggest stories across the entire sporting universe. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.